this will help you, I think, as he dissects an event in his life, a couple of events, and he puts those on the target for us. So will you join me as we welcome Mr. Alan Morrell?
I am so excited to be here tonight just to share with you guys how the tool that is usable has changed my life and how this really works. And believe me, sitting in your chair, maybe at home viewing this DVD, you may be thinking, how is this target really going to work for me? Is this really going to help when I'm in the midst of craziness, when I'm in the midst of chaos? Is drawing a target and filling these circles in going to do something to give me perspective on what's going on in my life? And I'm here to tell you that it really will. It really will. I really didn't, I thought it was great. I thought it looked great. I thought it sounded great. But until you really apply it to your own life and to your own situations, you have no idea how powerful it is. You have no idea how crucial it is to help you understanding your own processes and getting to the roots of those lies and replacing them with truth. So I want to show you a few examples, just a couple, of some things that have happened in my life and how you can kind of use the target to be that usable tool for yourself as well. All right? You guys ready? All right. Preface this just a bit, this first one. Growing up, I was into music all the time. That's pretty much what I did to spend my time, playing music and stuff. I didn't really do a lot of stuff that a lot of guys did growing up, fix cars, sports, all that stuff. I didn't really do a lot of that stuff with my dad either. That just wasn't what we did. We had more music in common and stuff like that. So I also grew up with negative experiences, as we've heard earlier tonight, original experiences that shaped my belief of who I was, that I just wasn't a normal kid. I wasn't a regular guy because I didn't know how to do that. Maybe I was made fun of for this, that, or the other in different situations growing up, which gave me a false perception of who I was. And I tended to base my belief on who I was on what others might have told me I was or said about me rather than what God says about me. Because, I didn't know what God said about me at that age. I was saved when I was 9, but I didn't know what God said about me. I knew I was saved, but I didn't know anything really about my identity in Christ and what that meant. So, fast forward 40 years. I guess I'll tell you how old I am. Fast forward, I'm in my early 40s, about a year and a half ago, and just really started putting this into practice. Had joined staff here at 180, was immersed in this teaching all the time, was coming through classes like this all the time, hearing these truths and these principles, and really starting to understand them in my head, and slowly but surely they were starting to play out and take root in my heart and in my life and manifest where I could see them as evidence of freedom in my everyday life. And so the point came where I thought, okay, I'm going to do something different than I've always done. I'm not going to hide from things that might expose what I don't know how to do. Because I spent my life pretty much putting up a wall and a shell and a make-believe persona of being good at whatever I really was, might be good at, making sure that's all you would see, making sure that's all anybody would see. Anything that could expose anything that I wasn't good at or didn't feel really confident in, you would never know about it. Because I either would never put myself in the situation or I would just do something to the extreme to where nobody would see that. So I started, believing this stuff in my heart, not just in my head, that my identity had nothing to do with whether I could fix a sink or not, or whether I knew how to put together a bicycle good or not. In Christmas time with our kids, my wife always put the bicycles together and stuff. She wasn't that great at it either, but she was a whole lot better at it than me. So that kind of thing, I would just seethe and just soak in self-condemnation about those types of things for most of my life until I started learning these truths. So I started thinking, okay, I'm going to see if this stuff's really real. So about a year and a half ago, we had a leaky sink in the kitchen. And I thought, okay, now honestly, what I would have normally done up until that point was to call a handyman connection or somebody that I didn't know, certainly somebody that I didn't know, so I wouldn't have to run into him again and then go, there's the guy that didn't know how to fix his sink. So some stranger that I probably wouldn't see who had a company base across town, not anywhere near me, call them and pay a ridiculous amount of money for something that I probably could have done if I'd have just tried. So I decided, okay, I'm going to try to do this. It's not who I am. It's not going to affect me. It's not going to push on my buttons. I'm just going to try it. If I don't do it, no big deal. I don't know how to do it. That's fine. I'll ask somebody that knows how to do it. So I did. I unscrewed the the hot water, and there was a screw in there, and I tightened the screw, and lo and behold, the water quit leaking. Well, I was about 10 minutes away from calling PBS to get my own Handyman Connection TV show, because it was happening, and there wasn't no telling what was going to happen next. So I was pretty confident at that point. About a week later, our tub started leaking in our downstairs bathroom. Well, I thought, well, I fixed the sink. What's a tub? I can fix the tub too. No big deal. Just undo it. There's a screw there. Tighten it up. Everything's going to be great. Tubs don't work that way, by the way. So I went in the bathroom, very confident, calm, not nervous at all. My daughter had given me a gift certificate for Christmas not long before that for some stuff at Home Depot, and I went and bought myself a toolbox and some tools, something I never would have done before because I wouldn't want to have them, because if I had them, I might have to try something, and that might expose that I don't know what I'm doing. So I had these new tools, and here's a chance to use them. So I go in the bathroom, and I, undo the fixtures best I can, and I'm looking for the little screw that looks like the one in the sink, but I couldn't find one, and there wasn't one. I was like, well, it must be underneath something else. So I keep pulling stuff out and unscrewing all this other stuff, and lo and behold, I get to the end, and there's a white plastic-looking plug-like thing that has a whole lot of force behind it, sucking it into the wall, and to where you're really not supposed to dislodge it. But I thought, there's nothing, the screw that I'm looking for has got to be behind that plastic plug. So, I had to, bear down and, pull with all my might to get this plug out. Well, y'all know what probably happened. When I pulled the plug out, Niagara Falls came into my house. So here's a wall of water, just ridiculous. Crazy, unbelievably ridiculous. Water's going everywhere. It was shooting all the way to the back wall of the bathroom. All of our pictures were soaked. Water was pouring into the air vents and the AC vents in the floor. My wife and my daughter's friend were getting ready for a wedding. So I have 3 women running around in the bottom of the house in their slips and underwear, trying to get on wedding clothes, using this bathroom for their mirror and their makeup. And I'm standing in the tub with Niagara Falls, pouring on me. They're walking by looking like, should we say something? Is the house going to float away? What's going on? And instantly, I was taken back to original experiences when I had tried some things and either was made fun of or felt stupid or felt inadequate or whatever, however you would say that. And the emotion that stemmed from those original experiences came back like that. I might as well have been 10 years old or 14 years old or whatever the age was for those experiences. So in that moment, my mind is not thinking, I've got to shut the water off. My mind went back to, you are so stupid. You are such an idiot. You are so incapable of doing anything right. You're basically going to have a flooded house. Your carpet's going to be ruined. I had just gotten the brand new keyboard, and all I saw in my mind was my keyboard floating down the street on a big wave. And I couldn't even think, you can do something about this. There was no sense of empowerment. There was only a sense of discouragement and defeat. So I got my wits for a minute, and after a few minutes, and thought, okay, wait a minute, I can turn the water off at the street. This was the first house we had owned. I never turned the water off at the street. I didn't know how to do that. I remember when we moved in, the owners told us there was a street key. I'd never seen it since the day we moved in. I don't know where I put it, So I'm running around. I'm soaking wet. There's water still pouring all through the bathroom out into the hall. My wife's in the bathroom with all these towels trying to, hold back the Pacific Ocean. And I'm running around the house trying to find a street key that's not even in the yard, but I'm thinking maybe God will just have it appear in the yard and I can use it. End up going across the street to a neighbor that I had never met, some guy. His dog tries to bite me, and he won't answer the door. And I'm like, please open the door. And I'm going to go, do you have a street key? And he was like, well, I don't know. Street key. Sat there for about 10 minutes talking about a street key. I'm going, my belongings are getting flooded here. Can you tell me what to do? Felt like an idiot completely. He said, I believe you can just go out on the street and turn that off, with a regular, tool. So went back in, got my toolbox, went out there, turned the water off, sat there for a minute. When I realized that it was off, everything was drenched. Everything was drenched. I thought back to what I was doing in that moment when the water was coming out. And I realized I had behaved in some pretty ridiculous ways. I had been pounding on the wall. I'd been just trying to punch a hole in the bathroom wall just out of sheer anger. I had actually hit myself with my fists, and I didn't even think about it. But when I was young and had experiences when I got made fun of or didn't fit in, I would hit myself with my fist. And in places where bruises wouldn't show necessarily to everybody else. And nobody ever knew I did that. But I did that in that instant. I hadn't done that in, I don't know, ridiculous amount of years. It wasn't anything I ever even thought about. But when that original place was touched, the original shame and the original humiliation came back, and I behaved in those same kind of ways. I was saying some really not good words as I was trying to beat up the bathroom. And Angela walked by, and the only thing she said to me, she looked at me and she said, "You know who you are." And that's not what I really wanted to hear. That's what I needed to hear. That's not what I wanted to hear. What I heard her say in my perception was something more like, you're trying to make me feel better, but you really think I'm stupid too. That's what I was hearing, what I thought she was saying, even though I knew she wasn't. So long story made short, they go off to the wedding, leave me sitting on the porch, completely drenched. Every towel in the house has been used. I mean, there is water, everywhere. Thankfully, it didn't ruin the carpet. Things were okay. It wasn't a disaster like I thought it was going to be. So I sat there, and I had been in a state of frenzy and just self-hatred for about 15 minutes. And I thought, it was almost like I heard a ding. And I thought, wait a minute. This is not about me being stupid. This is not about me just not knowing how to do something or fix a tub. This is God giving me an experience to choose truth and define my identity based on something other than what I always have in the past. Not based on performance, not based on knowledge or intellect or ability or anything like that. So I sat down, and really this was one of the first targets that I ever really sat down and drew. I'd thought about this, and I'd done it in my head several times, but I really sat down on the front porch, dripping wet, before I ever even cleaned the house up, and wrote this out. And I want to share it with you. Now, when you were doing this at home, when you encounter situations in your life, when you are spinning out of control and it's the time you want to use, the time you want to smoke, the time you want to do drugs, the time you want to look at porn, the time you want to dive into depression, the time you want to escape into panic, whatever the deal is that has you in a vicious cycle, when you get in those situations in your life, that is the time that these targets really help the most. And it is hard, guys, I'm telling you, it is really hard to stop in that moment because you're used to just going down that roller coaster that you've always gone on. It's very hard to stop and just say, hold on a minute. Let me breathe. Let me draw this out and see if I get some insight from it. You will not think you will. You will think there's no way you're going to learn anything. You're going to think nothing's going to make me feel better. But I promise you, the more you do this, the more it'll make sense to you and the more God will use it to help just solidify some truth and expose some lies at the same time. Now, when I'm doing this, it always helps me to start with the behavior. That's the easiest thing to do. That's what you see. That's what you're doing with your hands, with your actions, sometimes with your emotions even. So I always start with the behavior because it's really hard to pinpoint, bam, I know what I'm believing. I know what my beliefs are without looking at what's going on around you first, or at least it is for me. So I'm going to show it to you that way. So I sat down and I drew this out. What was I behaving? What was I doing? What was manifesting that would clue me in on what I was believing in that situation? I was not talking very nice to myself, that is for sure. I've chosen to call that abusive self-talk. It sounds a lot nicer than really what I was saying. I was hitting the wall. Or you could just say aggression. I was yelling. I also went outside and threw my new tools against the house trying to break them. Because that always helps fix your tub, by the way, if you didn't know that. I even a few times hit myself, as I mentioned. Now, this would have been, it didn't go there, but it was very clear that this would have been the place of escape. Whether that meant, for me in the past, pornography, binge eating, sleeping, going into a funk to where I was just depressed or anxious for 3 weeks, didn't do anything, didn't want to exercise, didn't want to talk to people, isolation, whatever that might have been. That would have been the place that I would have done that. In the past, before I knew these truths, before I understood the identity stuff that you guys have been learning, I would have chosen to go into my default mode, whatever that was, and that definition that event gave me and brought up from those original experiences, I would have just latched onto that as that's who I am. I can't do anything about it. Here's another proof. Here's just another indication of what I've always believed was true. And I wouldn't have known anything else to do but to live in that moment until maybe something good happened a couple of months later and I had a really good dot above the line, and then I think, okay, maybe I can kind of be hopeful and maybe I can relax and maybe start enjoying life again. Instead of 15 weeks or 15 days of a cycle over an event like that, pushing something in there in my core beliefs, I had about 15 minutes. And then I went inside, cleaned the house, called a friend who knows how to fix stuff. I went to Home Depot with him. We got the part. We fixed it together. And his family came over and had dinner. I would have never done that before because I would have been ashamed for him to even know that I couldn't fix it, much less relax and be with people. I would have been isolating. I would have been punishing myself for something that was, crazy in the first place. So that really, really, really started helping me understand that, this really works. This really helps you process and think through those types of things. Now, that was the behavior that was going on. So at the second point, you ask yourself, what are you thinking? What is your mindset? You see what you're doing. Now, what are you thinking? What are you telling yourself? I was telling myself things like this: nothing about me has changed at all. I was definitely feeling anxious. I was feeling a great, tremendous depth of sadness from those original experiences. I was thinking, what else should I expect? I was feeling thoughts and feelings of rage. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was projecting things on other people, such as my wife, thinking she must be thinking, he's so stupid, and other things like that. So I sat there with my behaviors listed, and I sat there with my mindsets. And then I thought, okay, what am I believing? What's the roots that are causing all this stuff to happen anyway, the way it's happening? And these are the three that came up from that particular experience. Those moments when I was reacting, I was believing old lies that said, I am stupid. I am inferior. I am not a normal man. And that was the toughest one to write down. And in fact, I did this in front of people in classes in our 2-week program for about 6 or 8 months and wouldn't even write that one down for the class. That's how hard that one was to say. So these were my lies for this particular situation. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, when you do this, you may do 100 targets. Chances are you're going to have some repeats in here. You may have 3 lies or 2 lies or 4 lies that kind of expose themselves. You're probably going to see some consistency in what some of them are over and over and over and over. And let me show you another one real quick because it's kind of interesting how God showed me this, and what I thought was something different really ended up being one of these really at the core. About a year after this happened, so I have a whole nother year of experience, whole nother year of being a part of things here at 180, doing events, teaching, being in classes, what have you. We were called to go to West Tennessee to a radio station in Jackson and do a radio show, about a 3 or 4 hour radio interview, all about 180, all about addiction. And so I went, Steve and I went, traveled over there. We met 2 other guys that are a part of the ministry, friends of Steve from West Tennessee, Kerry and Jason. Jason is our West Coast representative, and Kerry is a longtime part of 180. So we're there, the 4 of us, doing this radio interview. Man, I was excited. I wasn't nervous about it. I was like, it's radio. You know, I'm used to being in front of people singing and stuff. This will be so easy. You don't have to worry about anything, and just tell my story and talk and all that stuff. So everything was going fine. There was 3 places set up by the announcer, by the guy that was doing the radio show. And there were 3 microphones. It was a teeny tiny little studio, and that's all they had room for. Well, there were 4 of us. And so the guy said, well, let's see, we're going to do one segment, first. So we'll have Steve and Kerry and Alan, y'all come sit in here and do this segment. So I said, okay. So sat down. We went through, we did the segment. We each talked for a little bit about our own lives, about certain things to do with addiction, things to do with 180 and how we treat, addiction and those issues. And then it came time for Jason to have a turn. And it was only logical. I was on the end. It made sense for me to get up and him to take my seat on the panel. And I went back and kind of sat in the corner of the room, which was probably about, 3 by 3 feet. It was a teeny room. We were all still right there together. When that happened, something very unexpected happened that I never, ever saw coming. It was blindsided me. I mean, it was like a bolt out of the blue that knocked me off my feet. I felt completely unchosen and left out. And nobody had left me out. There were original experiences where I might have felt left out. So I'm in this radio station, studio. All this stuff's going on. I've just spoken. I've just represented the ministry. I felt good about what I said. I felt comfortable. But yet, simply because I was sitting across the room a few feet from the group of peers, specifically a group of guys, which growing up had been my source of validation and invalidation, God allowed me to see that I had a deep-rooted lie that I was unchosen, that I was left out, even if that wasn't the truth. So after that happened, I wrote this target out. Actually, on the way home, I was working on it, and Steve and I were driving home in the truck, but I didn't tell him I was working on a target because I was ashamed to tell him that at the time. So this is the target. I thought, okay, what was going on? Because God, you're showing me something, because this is stupid. This is crazy. I'm in a room with people, and I'm a part of what they're doing, but I feel completely left out. So what are you trying to show me? So what was my behavior? In my mind, this is what I was doing. Now, I'm putting it on behavior because mindset and behavior can get tricky sometimes. But for me, this felt more like behavior. I was comparing myself to the others in the room, even down to what kind of clothes I had on, or did I look stupid? We're doing a radio show. Who cares what I have on? Who cares what I look like? But I was thinking that. I was thinking, well, they look cooler than I do. To who? Ridiculous. I was inwardly retreating. Nobody could see that, but it was a very active thing going on inside of me. I felt like I was in a tunnel, and here I was going back really fast, away from everybody else. And I was thinking, surely if they look at me, they're going to see me down this long black hole. But it was all in my perception. I was projecting my negative thoughts on everybody else, thinking that they must see me the way I see myself. I got extremely nauseous and sick to my stomach. I broke out into a sweat. I don't know if I was. I felt like I started shaking. I don't know if I was or not. I felt completely frozen. Like when it's time for me to talk again, I won't even be able to utter a sound. I'm going to be like completely dumbfounded. That's how it felt. Mindset. What was going on? Was anxious. A lot of sadness. You see some correlation here? You'll notice that as you do your targets. I was thinking things like, I am not representing the ministry well. Performance. I was thinking, they think I'm stupid. Correlation. She thinks I'm stupid. And also, they all wish I hadn't even come. There's the unchosen thing again. I felt like I was being mocked or made fun of. And what I was hearing in my mind were past experiences. There was nobody in that room making fun of me. There was nobody in that room that didn't want me to be there. But I felt like they did. Even as crazy, I was looking at them thinking, I know they're not thinking that. But everything inside of me was saying, they're thinking it, buddy. You just watch. They're thinking it. So when I got to the end of this, I knew God was showing me and giving me an opportunity to choose truth and to figure out what kind of was underneath this target. I knew it was God, so there was a little bit of comfort there. I mean, it felt really bad and it wasn't fun, but I knew I'd done enough of these to know, okay, God's doing something. This is just not me feeling bad and having a crappy day. So in the middle, when I really got down to the beliefs, this is what I came up with until about a month ago. This is almost a year now that I would have written out my center this way, but I wasn't done. I thought I was, but I wasn't. I wrote, I am uninvited. I am unchosen or left out. Now, I knew that wasn't true, but that was what I was agreeing with in those moments. That was the lie that I was agreeing with. And I thought that was the end of that. I thought that was the bottom of it. But it really wasn't. And a couple of months ago, I was kind of looking through this, and God showed me that wasn't it at all. It was the same old thing. It was the same old thing. Really, the question was, if I am uninvited and unchosen and left out, why? Why would I be? And we came back down to, because I am inferior, which is usually always the base thing in my target in the center. It all comes back to that. It expresses differently, it looks differently, it behaves differently, it thinks differently, but it usually always comes back to I am inferior. So God was just showing me that there was a little bitty piece of that still there in those situations that I can't predict, and things come up. There was still something in there that was telling me to believe that I was inferior. So instead of looking at that as, I can't believe I felt that again, I can't believe after all this time I'm still doing that, I chose to look at it as, thank you, God, for giving me an opportunity to see that there's still something in there that you're working on. And as long as I know you're working on it, I have every reason to be hopeful. I have every reason to be excited. And I don't have to look at it as a negative thing. I can look at it as a positive thing because you're exposing the dark and you're bringing your light. You're replacing lies with truth. I hope that makes sense to you. I know that's just two examples, but performance and acceptance are two things that most everybody we see at 180 degrees deals with to some degree or another. So I challenge you to use this in your daily life. You know, even if it's an argument with your spouse or your kids or something, maybe that you might consider more serious, like an addiction or a habit or something that you find yourself gravitating towards to escape. Sit down and practice this tool. It really is usable. It really does help you change your perspective. It really does help you see why you're doing what you're doing.